Hello, everyone. Happy Tuesday. Welcome to Pasadena Humane's presentation of Wildlife in Watercolor. I am Miss Michelle, the outreach coordinator here, and I am joined by the ever so talented Miss Loni.
Hola.
And our resident wildlife enthusiast, Miss Lauren.
Hello.
So Miss Lauren is a plethora of knowledge, and Miss Loni is, her art skills are absolutely incredible, and we are so lucky to have her here with us today.
Thanks, friend.
And every month. So we've got some friends joining us, and so I want to address any webinar reminders with everyone in case this is the first time that they're joining us today. So, like I said, if this is your first time joining us, welcome, welcome, welcome. It is going to be a fun time today. You're going to do a little bit of art and learn a little something as well. So I want to remind everyone that this is audio and visual. So even though you can see and hear us, we can't see or hear you. And with that in mind, you can use the chat box on the right-hand side of your screen to go ahead and ask your questions, and we'll get to them as we can. So in today's webinar, we are going to be learning and painting the Prairie Dog and the Roadrunner as we continue our trip around across the United States, and we are learning about the Western region. Okay, upcoming at the end of the month, we have a workshop. Do you want to be a vet? This is going to take place on Sunday, March 28th, but try and register by March 22nd because we will be sending you some supplies in the mail. Okay, if for any reason you miss anything, you want to go back and see what Miss Loni does, or if there's a fun fact that you didn't quite get that Miss Lauren shared with us, this webinar is recorded and will be sent to you tomorrow afternoon. We love seeing the artwork that you guys create, so please submit your artwork using this link. I've also dropped it in the chat box. And without further ado, take it away, Miss Loni and Miss Lauren.
Hey guys. So before we get started with Miss Lauren, I just want to remind you guys that you should have received or you are in the process of cutting out your templates. Mine are here and ready to go. I actually cut out his little hand of the Prairie Dog just so it makes it easier to actually know the placement when you actually put him on the template. In terms of this little guy, I actually cut out his little feather area as well. So originally you would have received it like this, and I actually cut it out like that so that we can figure out tracing wise where the placement goes as well. You should have 2 pieces of watercolor paper or any strong paper. So any kind of paper to that sense, definitely. And then I have these really cool watercolors that we have handy dandy right here for you. I got these on Amazon. What really cool is they came with these really cool watercolor pens with different tips, which are super important for a lot of the detail work. Another thing is your pencil for your outlines, as well as if you want a pen or like a sharp fine tip pen is really important if you want to do like eyes or any detail work, or like a marker. Just like, yeah, see, Lauren's got it going.
These ones are my favorite.
I love those, actually, totally. I think I always have a set of those, but I always run out. Oh, and lastly, I use it like just a napkin to dab your watercolor painting on. So let's get started. I'm gonna first just start off with outlining the Prairie Dog, and then we will go ahead and do the Roadrunner. I'm gonna outline it really quickly and dark so you guys can see it. Remember that the great thing about this project is that there's a lot of layers involved, you guys. And because this program isn't very long, just kind of a reminder that you can actually go back and do multiple layers of these little guys. So I am probably not going to do as many layers as you guys can do after this program ends, but just please keep in mind that watercolor is all about time. And I think Lauren actually shared with me a really cool watercolor class painting that she took a few weeks ago. And that was what I learned from it after watching it too, because although I've been doing watercolor for about a year now with you guys, I'm just realizing that the more work and the more time you put into it, the more detail work you can actually put into it. So just keep that in mind. So as I'm outlining the Roadrunner, I'm just outlining the front part of his body. And I can't wait for us to talk about his feet, Lauren, at that point when we get there, because I feel like we learned a lot about this guy this week. And then the second half, I'm just kind of attaching to him, guys, as you can see. Wait, is that right? That is right. As you can see, but I'm kind of leaving a little space so that you can kind of know, because it's like really close, but I'm just kind of giving it a little space, just so that when you paint the feathers, you can kind of see the variations as well. Another thing that I talked to actually Lauren about is that all of this stuff takes a lot of time, you guys. So we are going to be working from one animal to the next, but I'm going to take breaks, drying breaks, because we had a lot of water on the pieces. And then I'll start working on the backgrounds as the actual characters are drying. So let's talk about prairie dogs. And before we talk about prairie dogs, I actually just want to talk about the colors that we're using for the prairie dog. So I'm going to use browns and yellows. So I'm going to set those out for you guys. Browns and yellows and blue in the background, and then probably black at the end. So this is kind of the color palette we're working with, and then a funky little color here on the side that I might mess with. So before we actually outline him, I'm sorry, before we actually start watercoloring, I did want to talk about how big his eyes are, right, Lauren? Because they have really pretty big eyes, right?
Yeah, they do. They have they're prey animals, and we talk about this a lot when we talk about the different animals that we're painting, about if they're predators or if they're prey. And so with these prey animals, their eyes are usually on the sides of their heads, just like that. And it allows them to see really well and keep a lookout for predators. That's one of the coolest things about prairie dogs and other related ground squirrels, is that they're we talk about this a lot, you know, their social habits of whatever animal we're talking about. And so these guys are very social, and they have they usually can have a couple different family members in their burrows with them. And so one of them usually is on the lookout for predators. They'll pop their heads up out of their holes, and they have this really cool language that they use, excuse me, and they will make little yip sounds or bark sounds. If you're talking about a prairie dog, that might be part of why it has the name. But they stay on alert to make sure that, you know, if there's a predator around, they can alert the rest of the family to go down and hide in the burrows. And then they'll also give an all clear sort of bark or yip once the danger has moved along. So they do have lots of different sounds they make, and they use their eyesight definitely to survive. And kind of like what you're painting there is that brownish color, and that helps them to blend in with the grasslands that they're found in. So we're talking about animals that are in the Southwest area, and so prairie dogs, they definitely are in, you know, areas where, like all animals, they go where they can find food. So where the kind of food that they like to eat is different kinds of grasses and roots and seeds. And what color are those? Usually kind of brownish, right? So they can sort of blend in with their food and the environment that they live in. And they also will have in late winter and early spring, kind of this time of year, is when they start their breeding season. And so usually they'll hang out for, you know, and have their breeding season for maybe about a month, and the females will carry the babies for about a month, and then they usually will have a litter of up to 10 babies. Isn't that a lot? Can you imagine?
So many. Yeah. Why do they have so many babies, Lauren?
Yeah, so because with most species that have large litters like that, it tends to be prey species. So they're a really important part of the food chain and the environmental cycle because they provide a food source to a lot of the predators that live in the area. And you know, those predators are also animals that are really beneficial and animals that we love, like, you know, hawks and birds of prey, and maybe some other ones that people are a little bit less attached to, such as snakes, and even some like badgers and other sort of ground predators.
Mhm.
Will use prairie dogs as food source. So they have a lot of babies so that there's a better chance that some of their babies will make it into adulthood and pass on those genetics to the next generation.
That's really interesting. So are they highly social with one another?
Yeah, they are. So yeah, in addition to their communication style and the amount of family members that sort of live together for a while, they're actually the largest group. So their underground tunnel system, some
Mhm.
people refer to them as towns,
Mhm.
and the largest one of those towns covered 25,000 square miles, and
Whoa.
that was in Texas, of course, because everything's bigger in Texas, right?
Totally.
And they estimate it was home to around 400 million prairie dogs.
Oh my gosh.
So, needless to say, they're pretty social. And normally their towns aren't that big. Sometimes they're as small as just one male and a couple of females and their babies. But usually they're a little bit bigger than that, and it depends on what specific species of prairie dog. There's a couple different kinds of species that are found in the American Southwest. Um, but another really cool thing about the burrows, so like I was talking about before, they have this massive tunnel system underground, kind of like the secret tunnels of Disneyland.
Yeah.
But they they're considered what's called a keystone species. So that's a species that is extremely beneficial to the environment in the fact that it is so interconnected with all these different other species, and a lot of other species rely on them for their survival too. So if we get rid of all the prairie dogs, we'll actually end up losing a lot of other species along with it. So as a keystone species, part of what's so important about prairie dogs is that and ground squirrels, they're closely related to ground squirrels, but they have these massive tunnel systems, and lots of different animals use those tunnels for their homes as well. So they're not just homes to prairie dogs, they're also often shared by some predator species, so like snakes and burrowing owls, and these endangered wild ferrets called the black-footed ferrets, and they're
Wow.
super rare, and the only food that they eat are prairie dogs. So it is a very important relationship.
It's
And
it's very much like the circle of life, right?
yeah,
That
so
whole idea.
you know,
That's
nature is tough sometimes, right? But it's really, everybody has an important role to play, and an important part of making sure the ecosystem is healthy. And so that's why, did you want to talk about what brush you're using?
Yeah, but before we do that, I wanted to let you guys know that I added like his little nose line here, which is a V. And I'm going to go ahead and show you the original painting I made so you can kind of understand what I did. So as you can see, I made like a little V in his little nose, and then I just brought it down. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. And then I just add a little black on the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and try that with this guy here. Go for it, Lauren.
Where was I?
Sorry.
Where That's okay. Oh, so they share their burrows with all these other species, right? And
Yeah.
even some of the predator species, but it's all very interconnected, and it holds its own sort of balance in that way. Um, so
That's
even the less fluffy and cozy parts of it are still really important. to learn about and to benefit the environment. I do want to go back and talk a little bit more about the family groups. You asked me about them being social, and what also is really sweet about the prairie dogs is they are really cooperative. So they not only do they share their burrows and their tunnels with all these other species, maybe not on purpose all the time, but they do cooperate with one another in sharing food, chasing off other, unwanted visitors, and they groom each other. And sometimes some groups will greet one another with a little prairie dog kiss or nuzzle. So it's really cute to see. And like I was saying before, the ground squirrels are closely related to prairie dogs, but a lot of people also get them and gophers confused, myself included.
Yeah.
So I did a little research to look up what the difference is, and and so gophers and prairie dogs, the similarity is that they're both rodents, and they're kind of around the same size, and they both live sort of on the ground and make tunnels. But prairie dogs are in the squirrel family, and gophers are not. Gophers have bigger teeth and bigger claws for digging. They're a lot more solitary, and that's as opposed to our very social prairie dogs.
Got it.
It's a little bit of the difference for you.
Yeah, well, that's really important because I think that, people never really talk about these animals very often, right? So it's very challenging when trying to explain it.
They tend to not be the most popular because they're not super glamorous, like, a cheetah or a leopard or something like that. But like I was saying before, these keystone species are really, really important to our environment and to the health of our environment, because if we lose prairie dogs and ground squirrels, then that's an entire food source that is lost. And so a lot of those other species that rely on them for food, especially the black-footed ferrets, they'll die off too, and we won't have any of those anymore. And so I think we need to give them a little bit more respect.
I agree. Well, and I love that you're bringing up the whole keystone thing, because I don't think that I've even realized that there was actually that kind of a word for it to emphasize the importance. Because, like, if, for example, you do get rid of, like, the ferret becomes just disappears, who knows what other animal was impacted by the ferret, and just becomes this, like, circle of, like, just all these animals that we're losing. So it's really neat that we're having that discussion right now about them. In terms of their predators, who are their predators?
So in addition to the black-footed ferret, their natural predators are badgers, wolves, coyotes, bobcats, golden eagles, hawks, the bigger hawks, not necessarily the smaller hawks. And so a lot of these really cool species that we all think, are really beautiful, and especially like bobcats, right, and wolves, and things that people are really concerned about protecting. And so if we want to talk about keeping those species populations healthy, we need to also talk about keeping their food source as in a good amount of supply. And to kind of piggyback off of that, even though the prairie dogs were super, super abundant for a long time, they actually their populations have been drastically reduced. And there have been a number of actual poisoning programs of ranchers who've considered them pests. And a lot of their habitat's been converted into croplands for farming.
Wow.
So it's just something we need to think about when we're thinking about protecting our human habitat as well, right? Because our human health is very connected to the health of our environment, which includes these wild animals and plants and different things such as what we're talking about today.
Yeah, absolutely. And then in terms of the environment that they're living in, so for example, in the painting I'm painting now, it's going to be pretty clear, right? They're just in kind of like big meadows and places where they're actually easily they're kind of easily seen, right? That's why they burrow the way they do.
Yeah, so even if they do end up making their little town in like a large grassland area, what they'll do, and this is part of why farmers don't necessarily love them so much, is they'll kind of almost like lawn mow everything around them,
Wow.
so that they can see everything far away, right? Because if you have a bunch of tall grasses, it's going to block your view, and you don't know if a predator is going to come around the corner.
True.
So that's big part of their work in creating their home environment is to keep that all cut pretty low.
Wow. So yeah, I can see why people would not want them in their territory digging holes everywhere, right?
Yeah, and even I go and play baseball with some friends on the weekend sometimes.
Yeah.
And some of the outfields, even last week I was at a field and I was out, shagging balls from someone who was doing batting practice, and I got so distracted because I saw all these little ground squirrel holes out there, and I was like so excited. And I saw one little guy poke his head up, and I was like, "Oh my God, a ground squirrel!" And then a baseball comes flying right by me.
That's so funny.
So
You know
the ground
what?
squirrels are around here for sure.
They are, because sometimes, like you said, my friends will set up volleyball at the park or something, and we have to be really careful when we're like trying to hit the ball because there's holes everywhere and you don't want to
Yeah,
like
you don't want
twist.
to break your ankle.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. Well, thanks, Lauren. I really like that whole info. I think I almost finished my little fella.
That's so
Um,
cute. He looks a
Thank
little bit
you.
angry.
Yeah, he's an angry man. I think he's angry about how much work and how beneficial he is to everybody. And we need to talk more about them and show them more love. But I was just adding a little bit more detail to like the dark line. So you guys, like I said, this is definitely a layering process. So I would definitely recommend adding more and more as sort of you add the layers, you can kind of see the difference in the depth of the time I took for this one versus this little guy here. But I would definitely say, as you can see, like I did a lot more wash, and that was adding a lot more colors. So I added a yellow, and then I added like 2 or 3 kinds of browns in that. So either way, you like them, Lauren?
Yeah, I really like the shading. Looks
Thank
nice.
you. I'm getting better, and I think this one definitely was like an hour project versus a 20-minute a 20-minute quick project. Michelle,
Watercolor is all about patience, I've
yes,
learned.
I have learned this as well, and especially because we keep getting more and more in depth with the animals that we're doing, it's definitely challenging me to kind of paint some really, really cool animals that we really don't talk about a lot. I
Hmm.
know Michelle, I know she has like some polls in regards to this cool little guy, so I
Little
know those
quiz.
will come up in a minute.
Oh, yes, I do. I love trivia.
So do
So,
we.
the first one going up is, what word can describe a prairie dog? Cuddly, fierce, or friendly?
Oh, I like this one.
With
Oh,
humans or with each other?
so
That's
just
good.
in general.
Because I think I have a answer for how they are with each other, and then an answer for how they are with humans.
Well, that's good. We can describe both.
What does everyone think, Michelle?
Well, we've got majority says friendly, about 25% at fierce, and a few that say cuddly. So we're gonna go ahead and close this poll, and I want to say the answer is actually fierce.
Nice. And
Yeah,
why is
I would
that?
say with each other, like I was talking about how they nuzzle each other when they first, say hi to each other. That's cute and friendly and cuddly. But with humans, they'll bite.
Yeah, so they can be quite fierce when protecting their turf, and they have been known to eliminate competition. And they are fast and skilled, and they have those sharp claws and those powerful teeth.
Yep.
So,
That's so.
and
Hmm.
Yeah, and then the last question, Lauren, you touched on it a little bit, but true or false, prairie dogs have an advanced vocabulary.
And vocabulary is spelled wrong. That's ironic.
Oh, vocabulary.
Oh.
Ignore the L.
And it doesn't happen to me often.
You usually catch them, Michelle, so.
You know what I normally do? I'm not sure what was going on. So I'm going to go ahead and close it. Mostly everyone says this is true, and it is true. So they do have an advanced vocabulary, and they're able to speak to each other. But when they speak to each other, they can actually say, instead of like, hey, someone's coming, to alert each other, they can actually come up with sounds that say, hey, there's a tall human wearing a blue hat.
That's so interesting.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, before we get started on this actual project, I just wanted to show you the inside line work I did for this guy. So do the best you can. I just added the mouth for his little beak here, and then I cut his little head kind of in half here and added his larger eyepiece. This is actually where his little feathers are going to start coming off of. And I just drew lines up. You don't have to do that. I just wanted to do it for my own reference. And then I added this just like these little, like, it's kind of like a little W to kind of see where his legs kind of start, because I want to add a little yellow in that area there. So here we are, and I feel like he's a pretty famous guy, right? That we've talked about him in cartoons and in the world, right?
Mm-hmm. So what colors are you gonna paint him?
You know what? I know that we talked about he's kind of out in the desert, kind of hot areas. I see yellows and blues in him a lot, and some grays. So I'm actually going to start with the lighter color first, and I'm going to add some yellow here from what I've seen in the photos of him. And I'm just going to, you guys don't worry, just kind of throw it around everywhere with water. It'll like just look kind of natural. And then we'll do an easy layer of grays and blues. And then finally I'll go over it with some black. But yeah, where does he usually live, Lauren?
So he's also found in the Southwest, but definitely not in, our Pasadena area. We don't really get to see them much except for I think they have one at the LA Zoo. But they live in what's called scrub brush, which is a kind of scrub brush kind of describes the sort of plants that are in the area. So there's also, like scrub jays, which are like blue jays, but we do see a lot of those around.
Yeah, we do.
And so it's pretty much just throughout the Southwest and into Northern California. They're in semi-open, scrubby habitat from below sea level up to nearly 10,000 feet. So they're pretty adaptable. Mm-hmm.
I like the scrub part that you're talking about.
I know. I feel like scrub is usually negative, but when you're talking about plants, scrub's kind of cool. I like scrubby plants.
Totally cool. So can we talk about his cool feet now?
Yes, of course. Okay, I love that you're painting his feet and you're blending that blue and the yellow, and you guys can paint them whatever color you want. But I definitely encourage you to look up some pictures too. And but the cool thing about the feet is that they are sort of in an X shape. So in Loni's drawing and painting, you only see the front two toes, but they have back two toes that are exactly the same, pointing in the opposite direction. And this is a really special part of the Roadrunners, and it plays an important part in the native and indigenous culture in the Southwest American area and in Mexico as well. And they have a special place in those legends and belief systems. The birds were sort of admired for their courage and their strength and their speed and their endurance, all of the kind of classic things that you think about when you think about a roadrunner. But especially with those X-shaped footprints, those two toes pointing forward and two pointing backward, they're used as a sacred symbols by Pueblo tribes to ward off evil. And the
Wow.
reason is because the X shape disguises the direction that the bird is heading. So you don't know if you see the tracks, if it's going this way or if it's going this way. And so that symbol is thought to prevent evil spirits from following.
That's amazing. It's so amazing how nature just creates all these interesting ways for animals to stay safe, you know? And to,
Totally, yeah. It's just an awesome example of adaptability.
yeah, absolutely. It's definitely a superpower that you would see on someone that is able to change directions and confuse people from following them and catching them. But it's really true that it's our animals all around us that have all these skills that we all want to have.
Totally. Yeah. They're
Yeah.
really well adapted. And we talk about fitness, so how fit they are for the environment. And that's just an example of what makes the Roadrunner fit for its environment as well.
That's awesome. In terms of babies, how many babies do they usually have, Lauren?
So they're usually fed by both parents, and they leave the nest after about 18 to 21 days. They stay fed by their parents up to another 30 to 40 days. That's sort of like the fledgling stage.
Mhm.
But you asked how many. So they're usually laying two to six eggs. And they do nest in trees, usually not at the very tip top of the trees, but maybe a couple feet off the ground, so that they can stay away from predators. But they do form lifelong bonds, and they renew the bonds each spring with a series of elaborate courtship steps and calls. So that's another reason why some birds are more colorful. It's to attract mates and to do sort of elaborate courtship dances to show how great they are and that they should mate with them. So I just think it's really cute that they renew their bonds each spring before having the next set of babies.
Yeah, that's really cool. So they definitely they sort of perform, right? They're performance animals.
Dancers, yeah, definitely.
Dancers.
Mhm.
I think I'd be a roadrunner then. If
Yeah,
I
and they
saw
actually they present food to their mate that they're trying to attract, which is like,
that.
you know, that's pretty relatable too. Bring some
Yeah,
good food.
definitely. Definitely.
And speaking of food, they are ground foragers and they're omnivores, so they eat both meat and vegetables and plant matter. They'll eat a lot of poisonous prey. That's like another cool superpower of them. So
It's so cool.
they'll eat venomous lizards and scorpions, and it doesn't hurt them at all. Though they are careful to swallow any horned lizards head first, because that way the horns are pointing away from any of their vital organs. So they do have to be
Wow.
somewhat careful. They can also eat and kill rattlesnakes. They usually take two of them to go after a rattlesnake. One of them will sort of distract the snake, and the other one will pin its head. Um,
Wow.
I won't get too much into the gruesome details after that, but if a snake is too big to eat all the way, they'll walk around with like half of it hanging out of its mouth, so that while it's digesting in its stomach, it'll slowly start going down, but it can take a while. So you might see a roadrunner walking around with half a snake hanging out of its mouth.
That is so vicious. That's so interesting and cool
They're
because
they're they're kind of
really
like
realize that.
they're kind of intense.
Yeah, they seem super intense and really interesting, actually. I think when you see them, you don't realize how much power and strength they actually have in their environment, right?
Yeah, and most people only think of them in terms of like Wile E. Coyote, and
Exactly.
so they just think of them as prey, but actually they're predators in their own right for sure. They also eat frogs and toads and other insects, centipedes, and sometimes even other birds.
Wow, that's
So
amazing.
yeah,
Yeah,
they'll eat. Go ahead.
it's just like the whole fact that we're talking about how vicious they are and how some of these birds that we really have talked about, a lot of them are just especially in our areas, they just seem to be very aggressive and just like very sort of, I don't know, they're just very king of their own domains, you know?
Sometimes, yeah, sometimes depends on what kind of bird it is, but definitely in the case of the Roadrunner, for sure. They'll also eat dead animals too, so they're pretty opportunistic. But they'll, sometimes they'll even go into other birds' nests and eat eggs out of the nests. But I mean, we eat chicken eggs, so it's kind of the same thing.
Totally.
I mean, maybe not everybody out there, but I eat chicken eggs. But
In terms, where do they hide out? I know I'm actually going to put in the scrubs, right? We call them scrubs, which is all the shrubbery.
Yeah, the scrub brush. Mm-hmm.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, so they can fly short distances. So they'll sometimes, if they need to get away from a predator, they can go up into a tree or something too. But they're pretty fast. They're not as fast as, say, a coyote.
Yeah.
So they can be prey to other predator species that can outrun them. But I think Michelle actually has a question about that. She's going to ask us later.
Oh, that's exciting.
Yeah.
So as you guys start painting, I'm just adding little hills, and I'm just using kind of the orange because of what Lauren said about sort of their areas. But I would definitely add oranges and yellows that kind of blend with the Roadrunner. So I'm going to start fading in yellows as well. And then we're going to go over and add some scrub brush all around. In terms of communication, how do they communicate with each other, Lauren?
They have like a call, like most birds. It's kind of a mournful sort of sound, like a coo, coo, coo.
Aw.
But it probably doesn't sound that soft, but you
Yeah.
guys should look it up on YouTube and listen and learn how to identify their sounds. But they most of the time use it to advertise their territories and those boundaries that their territories are. So kind of like what we were talking about, they are like the ground squirrels. They're fierce, and so they're protective of their area. And so they're gonna make sure that if they see other birds or animals that are coming into their area and stealing their resources, they're gonna make sure that they make lots of noise to try and make sure that they know, where they are.
Got it. And then we had talked about how they perform. So would you say that like their feathers and their plumage, like that's all part of sort of their mating dance and ritual as well?
Sure, yeah. With a lot of birds, kind of like what I was saying before, a lot of birds, the male are the more colorful one.
Mm-hmm.
I'm actually not sure if that's the case with Roadrunners.
Mm-hmm.
But sort of the ones that there's a couple different types too that you can find. But it seems like the Roadrunners, the males and the females, look pretty similar. Yeah. So, but they will like wag their tail and stuff and do kind of a display to tempt the female into mating with them. But I think also the main thing with their ritual is that food offering too. So a lot of times it's a lizard or a snake or even like a mouse or something, to sort of entice the female and show that he's a good provider, right?
Yeah.
And jumping around in the air and stuff.
Yeah, that's really interesting. Yeah, and we don't see them around here in the same way, so not like our prairie dogs or
Right, yeah. And like prairie dogs, they don't make good pets. So we talk a lot about animals here at, Pasadena Humane, and we have a lot that are up for adoption. But these wild animals that we talk about do not make good pets.
I love that. Very, very good. Very, very true. Okay, guys. So the final thing we're going to do is actually take some green and create some of the background. So I would say try to find a darker green to kind of start making the bushes in the back. And I really recommend pointy, I don't know if you can see that, a very pointy tipped watercolor pen for stuff like this. I think it really makes a huge difference when you're trying to add the effect of this kind of detail work. Then you can kind of see the bushes kind of really pop out. And I love doing this kind of, you can put it anywhere you want. You can blend some of the greens together like that.
You guys could even draw a cactus if you want, because
Oh
sometimes
yes,
in areas where there's
I
some
could
cactuses.
totally do a cactus in the back here.
Oh, cute.
Yeah, I'll do that. There you go. That's a very traditional cactus.
Yes, I love it. A saguaro.
Yeah, saguaro. I love the saguaro. Yeah, and then I love it because green's my favorite color for the most part. So I love it because green always adds so much life.
Nice little pop.
Especially, right? Especially because these animals, it's really amazing, you guys, when you think about if you go visit the desert or whatever, and you see how hot it is and how difficult it is to survive there in these hot areas. It's really amazing to see how these animals can just like really get through all of the elements,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
You know,
I don't,
another fun fact about their nest too is that they'll use snake skins and cow manure to build their nest.
wow.
And sometimes they'll build their nest in the cactuses or in some of those scrub brush bushes.
That is so cool. And then the final thing I'm going to add is his eye. And it's a pretty circular eye, you guys. So I'm going to go ahead and finish his lower liner because I'm really good at eyeliner. So there you go.
Ooh.
Many years of practice. But also, and if this is too hard for you guys, go ahead and grab a pen, just like Lauren had. That would be really helpful for like all the detail work. So there you go. How do you like
Love
him?
it.
You love it? I love it
So
too.
cute.
Thanks, friend. I really like your sort of you saying to add the cactus. So I need to add more cactus guys in our scenes as well. So I know Michelle has some awesome polls to kind of launch and share with you guys.
Yeah, so I know Lauren asked or mentioned that roadrunners can run pretty fast. So how fast do you think a roadrunner can run? Up to 15 miles an hour, up to 30 miles an hour, up to 50, or as fast as a coyote? So, oh, we've got a few different answers coming up. So, and I'll give the poll a couple more seconds before I close it. All right, 3, 2, and 1. Everybody that answered this poll will be completely surprised to know that a roadrunner can only run up to 15 miles an hour. So it's pretty fast for a bird. Okay, so and as Lauren had mentioned, they do swim or fly for short bursts of time, and that's typically when they do need to get away from predators. So, and then the last question I have for the audience is a true or false. Roadrunners like to sunbathe. So we know that they live, you know, in the Southwest, usually out there in the desert. So, and then Lauren, after I'm done with this, I have one question for you about roadrunners.
Uh-oh.
It's an audience question.
You're gonna stump me.
Uh-oh.
So, okay, so I'm gonna go ahead and close this poll. It's dead even. Half of everyone says true and half says false. So the answer is actually true. On cool desert nights, the roadrunners enter a state of torpor, which is allowing their body temperature to drop to conserve energy. So to recover from their cold night of slumber, they spend the morning lying out in the sun with their feathers raised to allow that sun to reach their skin.
Sounds lovely.
So, all right, and then Lauren, from our audience, will roadrunners attack people?
That's a good question. I You know, I couldn't tell you. I
You haven't
wouldn't be
seen that.
surprised. I wouldn't be surprised if they did. Because I know that there's lots of birds like geese and ducks that are also very territorial that'll come after you. So, my guess would be if you're getting near a nest, if you're in their territory, they probably would come after you. But
Yeah.
like also with most wildlife, if you leave it alone and respect it, they're more than likely not going to want anything to do with you because we're the predators. So they don't really want to come after us either. But like I said, I'm not 100% on that. So double check, do some Googling and some research yourself and find out and let me know.
I love it. Well, I
Oh,
love it.
well,
Thanks, guys.
ladies, thank you as always. Lonnie, your pictures were amazing,
Thank you.
as I've come to expect. And for everyone out there, we also really, really want to see your artwork. So I've dropped the link in the chat box, and you know, I'm very curious to see. I got a couple of people that said that, you know, maybe the prairie dog is a little bit angry because of the way that they look.
Oh,
So, which I don't think is true, but you know, we'd love to see what you have created in the time that you spent with us today. So we do hope that you guys will join us for Wildlife and Watercolor next month as we continue our tour across the United States.
Thanks,
So,
guys.
bye, ladies. Have a good afternoon.
You too.
yeah.